Shalom from Jerusalem. Al Shaka O Satlana. This is our Middle East meaning Jews, Christians, Muslims, Kurds, Alawites, you name it. This is a Middle East constructed of so many minorities, a thriving, complex, colorful region that is renewing and also becoming more dangerous at the same time. And today we're talking about artificial intelligence. A game changer can be a deadly game changer and can also help the Middle East stabilize itself. We have one of the great experts in technology transfers and artificial intelligence coming with us from the United States. Top of the morning, first coffee. Harry Rubin, a senior partner for technology at Kramer-Levin law firm. Harry has been a longtime expert in technology transfer, having published widely on the issue. He is a Harvard University graduate, a Columbia Law School graduate, international law expert, and a major expert in German-Israeli relations. Very, very happy and honored to have you, Harry Rubin, on the program. Harry, AI, artificial intelligence, changing the face of Middle Eastern national security issues, military operations. Let's give us an overview of the significance of AI when it comes to this very complex Middle East that faces obstacles and opportunity.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, it's very easy to get caught up in hyperbole when one talks about AI, but this is really the real thing. People have likened it to the Industrial Revolution. Henry Kissinger and Warren Buffett talked about it being equal to the invention of the nuclear bomb. Numerous technology experts around the world have called this an existential threat to humanity and a world changer. And, I'm going to try to be careful because I know that some people think that all lawyers' intelligence is artificial. Try to keep it real. The issue really is that since the advent of computing itself, and probably the internet, there has been anything as transformative as this. We are dealing with technologies that are able to create their own parallel reality, that are able to generate outputs, data, video, materials at incredible speed, and where we are not able to pinpoint the source or test the accuracy. So this can be an enormous blessing, and it will be and already has been, but it can always be an enormous threat to stability, global and regional. And I think we should dig down a bit further as to why that is, and, what Israel's role in this can be and how it could impact the Middle East and generally global security.
Harry, Israel is way ahead of the game on AI. I mean, there's OpenAI, there's ChatGPT. Israeli scientists have been involved in the development of all of those. And it seems that it really is a game changer, not only on the military battlefield traditionally understood, classically assessed as we've known it, but we're talking about shifts in diplomacy, shifts in defense policy, shifts in culture. I mean, you name it, water, food technology. I mean, every single category that can fall either loosely or more tightly under national security is going to be affected by AI. What is Israel's advantage in your estimation?
So Israel clearly is one of the top, I would say maybe 5 technology powers in the world, has already made AI a strategic priority. And just recently, there was a big article in Bloomberg about this, how the Israeli military is using AI for mapping and targeting purposes. And there is no question that Israel is going to be at the forefront of this. However, it is also clear that by far the 2 leading powers in this are obviously the United States and China. And China is not constrained by privacy concerns or individual rights, and they're going full speed on this. They're now in a situation where they have basically controlled their technology companies and made sure that everything that an AI technology company in China does is subject to the purview of the PCC. Now, as you know, the Chinese, Russia, Iran axis has become very, very intimate. Russia is also extremely sophisticated in technology. And so this is something to contend with. The Iranians actually are technologically sophisticated. And one thing to remember about AI is, and this is why I called it the great equalizer, you don't need to have nuclear bombs and you don't need to have an air force. You need to have some very sophisticated technology computer people with high power computers with graphical processing units. And that's something that any government can do, and certainly if it puts its mind to it. So on the one hand, Israel clearly has an advantage. On the other hand, the threat is significant. And when you think about the potential for AI, which already we have seen examples of, its own reality, to foment domestic instability, to engage in political and cyber warfare, then you can understand, for example, that if all of a sudden you see videos, artificial videos created of Israeli soldiers abusing Palestinians, and this is purely fictitious, but it's widely disseminated, what this could happen, what this could do. So one has to think about this both defensively and offensively.
Absolutely. And what you're saying is it's a great democratizer in terms of the fact that Israel has had since the 1970s a qualitative military edge, having been provided by the United States on the battlefield. So what I understand you to say is that, well, wait a second, that qualitative military edge can be equalized very quickly by creating, new realities, avatars, and false pictures, destabilization, cyber warfare. What is it, in your view, if there are one or two or three things that Israel would have to be nervous about in terms of, whether the Palestinian Authority got a hold of some of these programs, or whether you had computer jockeys sitting in Tehran operating these things? What kinds of scenarios should Israel even think about when it comes to AI?
So, for example, this could be easily exploited. The internal division currently in Israel and the judicial reform system. There could be artificial videos and scenarios coming up created that foment tension, that foment instability, complete manipulation and political warfare. The same thing on the Palestinian scale. We just had recently in the U.S. a video, a completely artificial video, obviously fake, a deep fake, in fact, that showed China invading Taiwan, and as a result, revolutions happening in San Francisco streets. So there is no limit to what can happen here. And this is what I'm saying. This is why I'm saying, the temptation is for governments and defense forces to focus on the offensive aspect. How do we use AI to make our military more effective for targeting, to mapping purposes? But the defense, in other words, ensuring that this doesn't descend into domestic chaos because of manipulation, is just as important. And obviously, there is another far-reaching danger we should talk about, which is, are we going to be in a situation where AI does more than just, for example, select targets? Is it going to decide when it pulls the trigger? And even worse, are we going to have AI making political and strategic decisions and making policymakers obsolete or sidelined? We could be in that position.
Does regulation have a big role here? Is there a pretext to say that lawmakers in the United States, which would probably lead on AI, because in the United States, on the issues of regulation, on the issues of moral constraint, probably lead the rest of the world on because of its political system on these sorts of sensitive legislative issues?
Precisely. And in fact, there are all sorts of legislative efforts pending before Congress pertaining to national security, privacy, intellectual property, and people are trying to get their arms around it. Senator Schumer is trying to expedite this. It's a very complicated topic. It involves technology at the highest level, and it involves a lot of legal disciplines and individual rights. And what you're seeing in Europe, and this is a very important point, they are coming up with all sorts of regulations, which, with the best of intentions, which are primarily designed to protect individual rights for the right reasons. But there is the danger that they will overregulate themselves and put the entire AI field and technology companies on the sidelines, and will deter development. And we need the Europeans to be part of the Western technology front, if you will, if you want to call it that, to counterbalance the Chinese, Russia, Iran, North Korea angle, which are not constraints by regulations or any concerns for individual rights. So we need the Europeans to be an active part. There are very sophisticated technology companies in Europe, highly sophisticated people, and I'm hoping that the policymakers in Europe will not suffocate that industry over regulating.
And to what extent is AI put a lot of power in the hands of unfettered, unrestricted private hands in the private sector that basically disallows the public sector from having a relative advantage? I mean, this is just sort of like another high-tech, empirical move, but it has major national security implications, so that the gap between private technology capability and profitability way outweighs public policy and national security policy of major powers.
Yes, this is a very important point. So all of a sudden you can have private organizations, private interest groups generating their own foreign policy, creating their own deepfakes, engaging in political incitement without any oversight or ability to really find out who it is and how it came about, etc. So part of the defense effort and part of the regulatory effort has to be to contain that, but that's a very real danger, and frankly, it's already happening. It has happened even before the emergence of AI. By the way, people were extremely surprised with AI becoming so powerful so quickly. Usually, people were thinking that we would have this conversation in 20 years. But the AI age, the epoch of AI is upon us, and it's intensifying daily.
How advanced is AI when it comes to the classical military battlefield? Do we know in any way examples of U.S. military's use of AI in the international battlefield?
So, first of all, it's sometimes difficult to create a demarcation line between what AI is and what cyber warfare is and electronic warfare and all the rest. At some stage, obviously, they intersect. This is all extremely, classified as it should be. You read reports every now and then that various air forces and navies use it for mapping purposes, targeting purposes, et cetera, et cetera. But as I said to you, the real concern is, when does it move from being a tool and migrate to being a decision maker, either on the tactical front, deciding whether or not some building should be blown up, making that decision independently without oversight, or even worse, is it going to supplant individual policy making and strategic thinking? And this is something that Henry Kissinger has talked about a lot. I mean, are we going to abdicate foreign policy and defense policy to AI? And at what point is AI going to basically control all? Because there's the real danger, obviously, you think in terms of science fiction. You think back to HAL, the supercomputer of Odyssey 2001, right? That's the real danger that ultimately we're all contending with, which is why you're having all the movers and shakers in major technology companies really calling either for a moratorium, which I think is highly unlikely, or at least, as you alluded to, some sophisticated regulation.
It seems like AI really, if you think back to the internet back in 1994, 95, that this is just another a watershed moment. I remember back in those days, we thought, well, the internet gives you instantaneous presence, 360 degrees, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in the end, the platform sort of stabilized and equalized, giving everyone sort of this democratic access to the internet, and it sort of found its own level. You used to make the point in your own technology transfer assessments that it's the private sector that really has to be leading here, even though obviously government regulation will play a strong part. Your view was on the internet. I remember that it was the private sector that would have to take the lead in also in restriction and also unrestriction in using these types of technologies.
Yes, I think we're in a different place now. I think the technology and the potential, both the incredible positive potential. I mean, for example, AI has done amazing things in drug discovery, in a lot of things, and the potential here really is unlimited. The potential for upheaval is likewise unlimited. And I think governments will have to come together on this, both on a national and global level. To what extent it's realistic, I don't know. But I think people recognize that this is really a tectonic shift. And even though AI technology companies need to be encouraged to develop technology, both AI technology and AI controlling technology, if you will, what we call the defense AI technologies, I think the regulatory aspects, the regulatory angle here is going to have to come about much more powerfully and much more quickly, and will have to be globally coordinated to some extent. I mean, a lot of people have called for a global AI treaty, to the extent that you can get China, Russia, the U.S., together on something like that. I mean, that may be wishful thinking, but at some point, one hopes that enlightened self-interest will propel something like that.
You know, what seems ominous here is that you can take countries across the African continent, for example, whose population is going to double in the next by 2030, and whose GDP is something like $2 to $4 a day. And if governments acquire one or two breakaway AI capabilities, it all of a sudden can raise their defense and offense postures almost in a certain way to that of major superpowers.
That's exactly right. That's why I called it the great equalizer, right? It's a great equalizer on an individual level, but also on a societal, governmental level. And bad actors, which we have and will have, will manipulate and exploit that technology. And the one thing that has been true in the history of technology is that once technology is out there, you cannot do it, right? You can't bring the genie back into the bottle. And so that's something we all have to deal with. But I am somewhat optimistic about the attention that AI has been getting, both the good and the bad, and the rapid response of regulators and legislators in the EU, even though they may get it wrong, and in the US and other countries, that people understand what's happening and what the stakes are. And you really have an unprecedented chorus of highly influential, important people, whether it's statesmen or technology visionaries and executives or technology companies, that understand that this is a fundamental shift in how we have to approach things. And I think something will have to.
You look at the classic battlefield, you can easily imagine that it will cut troop deployment, by orders of magnitude of 10 and 20 and 1,000%. You can essentially be conducting a war through AI on a screen from a what they call a hamal or a war room.
Especially when you combine this with drones and robotics and unmanned aircraft and all the rest, which you're already seeing this in the Ukrainian situation. And this is going to continue, obviously, developing exponentially.
So
AI, the potential.
What is this? What is your sense of AI being a life-saving technology for what we used to call the third world?
Enormous. So we're talking here about the national security implications and the potential dangers and all the rest. But as I said, the good is overwhelming here, and it's discovered an antibiotic that people were not aware of. It is going to exponentially increase drug development, potency, molecular development in all aspects of human endeavor, whether it's irrigation, agriculture, any aspect of technology. AI is going to leapfrog us ahead. And so we need to rise to the challenge and harness the good without succumbing to the bad. And that's really what needs to happen.
What are some of the issues in AI that we need to think of we haven't talked about yet in our 20-minute discussion here about the advent of this technology? I'm just thinking of other applications, whether it's it's really fully autonomous cars driving, military vehicles driving. Obviously, transportation revolution is unprecedented in its potential. What other issues in AI from where you sit, sort of one of the path breakers on this issue in your 35-year career, even more, I think 40-year career almost in technology transfers?
let's make it 35. 40 is too much. But when you think about it analytically, there are really sort of three categories you have to deal with. It's the inputs, right? What goes into the AI machines, if you will. What are the computational processes? How is it being used and fundamentally altered? And then the outputs generated by AI. And the danger here is that you could be looking at AI in some sense as a polite pathological liar and hallucinator, right? Because it creates its own parallel reality. You are not able to pinpoint or source the output. And as a result, you very frequently have something called what I would call garbage in, garbage out. If you ask AI, for example, as I've had a friend recently do it, who was doing a PhD in history of some obscure 16th century French person, to please give you a list of articles about that person, whether it was one, it comes back and says, certainly, here are 8 articles. It turns out that none of these articles exist. Recently, a lawyer used AI for a litigation in the Eastern District of New York and cited cases that were created by AI fictitiously. The lawyer was obviously censored. So the legal minefield here, in terms of intellectual property, privacy, bias, liability, who is responsible for what, and what duties do we impose on people when they use AI and provide it to somebody else, is absolutely enormous. And a lot of this will be resolved with contractual allocation of liability, but the rest will probably be resolved by legislation. And so we are really in uncharted waters, but this obviously has been the most exciting thing I've seen since I started.
How do you price technology like this? It seems to be a big challenge because on the one hand, AI right now has been fairly centralized in terms of the number of people who really have an edge in developing the technology. It's not like super broadly developed, if I'm not mistaken. It's you can probably count the really big pioneers in AI on 2 hands.
Okay, so what's very interesting, if you look at what has driven the stock market in the past 6 to 9 months, it is really AI technologies. It's primarily the microchips, microprocessors, companies like NVIDIA, that have revolutionized the capacity to absorb and transmit and use data, which is now increased exponentially in hitherto unknown, unanticipated formats and capacities. Because what's happening is that in order to generate AI outputs, what I call AI outputs, you need gargantuan amounts of data sets. And in order to do that, you need microprocessors, microchips that can do things at a speed and capacity that has never been achieved before, and that's being achieved now. So when you talk about valuation of technology companies, it's always an issue, and ultimately the market decides. But it really is the segments that enable this technology in the first place right now, which is the microchips that are very highly valued, and then analytics software that is able to analyze, quantify, and synthesize enormous data sets, big data. Those are the 2 areas I think that are going to be seen the most valuable in the market.
In the post-Abraham Accords reality, after September 2020, Israel increasingly, and you and I actually have chatted about this. We were in New York together recently. We chatted about this. Is perceived as a solution in the Middle East, as opposed to decades of being perceived as the problem in the Middle East. Can Israel use AI responsibly, humanistically, sensitively in order to further deepen its membership in this Arab Muslim majority Middle East?
It can and it should, and I think it should do it proactively and very creatively and aggressively. Because remember, we're talking about military issues and national security, but the blessings of AI, and I just talked about, one that is very palpable, drug development in biotechnology, developments of other technologies, irrigation, geographic mapping that could be used in order to enhance agricultural capabilities in water. I mean, really, this, managing oil output in energy companies, for example. I mean, every industry that is out there, that is meaningful, that is salient to the Middle Eastern countries, will benefit enormously from efficiencies and strategy that employ AI. So I would hope and I expect that Israeli AI companies are actively pursuing these efforts, and I would think that the neighbors of Israel in the Middle East are very interested in partaking in this effort. I mean, increasingly, obviously, they're interested in technology. They would be tremendous benefit for them in the adoption of AI.
You know, Harry, one of the things that we're doing at the revivified, repositioned Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, which you and I have been talking about for years since I first joined the Institute or the center back in 2002, is engaging young people, young men and women innovators across the Middle East, in Jerusalem or in London or in Abu Dhabi or even in Saudi, to engage in these types of intellectual and technology discussions, these roundtables. Are you finding that AI development is present within our Arab neighbors in the capitals of the Arab world?
I don't have enough visibility to opine on that. I mean, I do know of various initiatives, and I'm thinking. I mean, I think, for example, your institute is ideally situated to provide an umbrella organization to bring people together from the Middle East, and particularly young people, because this is a young people's industry. It's technology, to do that, which will be extremely exciting and beneficial.
Well, it's one of the things that we're planning. We'd love to have you come as an expert to lecture on this issue at the roundtable. But what we are doing, funny enough, is identifying young Arab women and men, also in the Palestinian Authority-controlled areas, who are in their 20s, in their 30s, and who are shedding all of the decades-old narratives and propaganda, if I might say, and they're looking forward to innovation, to sharing these technological spaces and intelligence with their Israeli counterparts. And we're at the Jerusalem Center looking very much forward to having these innovation roundtables. We've talked to some stakeholders already in the UK from the Arab world. I think that this probably would be a very good a starter to have an AI roundtable of young innovators. And already here on Our Middle East, I'd like to invite you as a guest, as a masterclass speaker, to have one of these roundtables. I think it's a great way to start.
I think it is, and there is no question that the common good in areas that are critical, to the Middle East, medicine, irrigation, agriculture, climate control initiatives, all of these things would be a wonderful way to bridge political differences and bring people together on the basis of common interests. So,
well, I think that's the best way. I think that's the best way of saying it. Harry Rubin, technology transfer expert, senior partner at Kramer Levin law firm in New York, an Israeli German by background, Israeli military intelligence by background and training, and will be a Harvard and Columbia grad. Be very happy to have you come make the trip from New York, either to Jerusalem or to Bahrain or to Abu Dhabi or to London, and help lead one of these really futuristic roundtables with young women and men who are going to be defining the future of the Middle East. And I think all credit goes to the former U.S. administration as well as other stakeholders who really pushed this, as well as Mr. Netanyahu really pushed this Abraham Accord model, which seems to be taking hold and continuing, but really needs content. Yes. It can be perceived by the peoples of the Middle East, not just the transactors of business and not just the top of the political triangle or hierarchy, that this can really bring benefits to the peoples of the Middle East. And that's what our interest is at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, as a trusted partner together with our Arab partners and our Persian partners and our Turkish partners and others that make up this very complex and colorful Middle East region with great potential. And I think we'll start here. You've given me some great ideas here, Harry Rubin. Thank you for weighing in and sharing some of your expertise with us. We'll look forward to seeing you here in the region with young innovators, men and women both, to advance and discuss the constraints of artificial intelligence and everything connected to food security, water security, defense, military, classic and non-classic, both the opportunities, the obstacles, and the dangers, and the prospects for a region that is deeply affected by a technology that is no turning back. It's only moving forward. AI, artificial intelligence. This has been our Middle East, Al-Sharq Al-Awsat Lana Ma'an, together building a new region with new possibilities, new innovation and technologies. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you, Harry Rubin, for joining us from New York.
My pleasure. Thank you.